Welcome to Analytics Nexus. Thanks for joining us for Chris Comstock's presentation, Powering Digital Transformation, How to Enable a Common Experience Data Model Across the Enterprise. Chris has over 15 years of experience working as a digital marketing and data management consultant, brand, and product leader for a variety of top companies including Adobe and Oracle. He spent several years at Bitly helping to expand their product offering through Enable Deep Linking, and most recently was responsible for all first-party data products, including BlueKai DMP and Oracle OnRamp product. He now heads Claravine's product vision.
Thanks for joining me today at Analytics Nexus. I'm Chris Comstock, Chief Product Officer at Claravine, where I'm responsible for driving our product strategy. Having a common data model covering both content creation and marketing campaigns is an essential component to fuel personalization and decision-making at scale. Unfortunately, the explosion of marketing platforms, teams, and agencies that are involved in creating any form of digital experience means data is inherently fragmented across these different platforms and data sets. While ETL can help bring together existing data, not having a standardization that can be rolled out to those different content creators and teams makes it very difficult to understand the context of that data when it was created. Today, we're going to talk about how to enable a common experience data model across those different teams and platforms and how Claravine fits into that equation. The Intuit CIO at Adobe Summit last year provided this quote that talks about any issue with data delivered to the right team at the right time. If it's not delivered that way, it should set off alarms, much like any sort of product incident. A good example of that is most recently in the passing of Kobe Bryant. As I was following along on Twitter, this happened from the BBC News. In the spirit of trying to move extremely fast, they pieced together video content, starting with Kobe Bryant and quickly moving into a highlight of what was supposed to be Kobe Bryant playing for the Lakers, but ended up being LeBron James. Nobody really wants this to have happen to their brand, but they do want to be able to capture the moment as news is breaking and be able to move extremely fast. Part of the challenges that presents is the explosion of all the different pieces that go into creating those experiences and getting them pushed out to the different consumers. One of my favorite is this example from the Chief MarTech Awards, where Cisco represented all of the different solutions that are being used across their organization related back to their customer at the center. You can see here, there are many overlaps in functionality, but each different team with different use cases involved is using different solutions for different buying types, all the way down to the analytics systems in play at the bottom. This is a pretty common view across many large enterprise customers. And so if we take that one step further and we take one specific team, this is an example of a customer and all the different solutions and the complexity that goes into setting up a campaign. So for a single email campaign, for a retail customer who has a mobile app that wants to get the right consumer to the right device, all while still being able to track all the different touch points across their different technology solutions. For this email marketer, they have their email vendor in play. They have a mobile deep linking to route the users to the right device. For users that don't have the app installed, they want to send them to the App Store to drive downloads. All while making sure that when someone is on the device with the app installed, they're taken to the right experience within the app. All of that changes because that same email link needs to also be aware that when someone clicks on that through their email on their laptop, it should take them to the proper web experience. In many cases, which is not uncommon, there's multiple analytic solutions at play, multiple set of web tags that are also being used to capture data, build audiences for eventual remarketing. There's CDPs that come into the mix. And so if you take a step back and look at for a single email marketer, as they segment their email list to create the different touch points, they easily get over 350 different unique data points in order to be able to track the right experience on the right device, as well as make sure everything is functioning properly, both from a data collection standpoint and to properly give the user the right customer experience. So if we think about what are all those different data points, what is the metadata that goes into play? Sometimes some of the pieces of metadata within a marketing organization often go overlooked. So there's everything from your product catalog. What are the product information? It doesn't have to just be from a retail perspective, but just the general products and business unit information. Campaign specific information. So campaign names, placement names, ad groups. What's the campaign objective? Is it a customer acquisition campaign? Is it a retention campaign? Being able to have that awareness across the different point solutions. Many of the different campaigns have some form of creative, some digital experience. What is that creative? Has an ID, has a name, the size, specific color, tags, information about that creative asset. Where's that experience being delivered? Is it on a web page? What is the content? What are the images? Is it a mobile app? Is it iOS versus Android? And then the people at play. What team created the experience? What business unit are they in? What group are they in? Is it an agency? What region, geographic region? All these things are examples of metadata that all fit together to tell the story around what your marketing campaigns are doing and the metadata that feeds into that. So if we think about where does Claravine and kind of what does the landscape look before Claravine helps a company go through a digital transformation and how to put that in the hands of the different teams. So you see all these different point solutions that have a specific purpose, as we looked at in the Cisco example. All of that metadata is flowing in to drive digital experiences and then ultimately into the analytics and decisioning engines. Now, if we look at more of a representative example across the large enterprise customer, there may be standard solutions in play, but there are also maybe many different people using different versions of those different solutions. So if you look at the North America team as an example, they may have Adobe Campaign for their email solution. They have an agency running their paid media, paid display. They're using Kenshu, managing their search in-house. And they have a social publishing tool, and they're using AEM for their content management system. And then also have a number of solutions and tools used to understand their mobile app install ecosystem. And moving to other regions, you see here a different, could be using ExactTarget. They have a different agency in EMEA sitting over top of display and search. And then the APAC region, only running paid media on Google. And a variety of these different solutions, it becomes very difficult to have any sort of standard naming convention, standard set of metadata that can drive experiences across the different channels and teams. Now, if we take a look at just one single field, the campaign name field, so most all point solution or execution solutions have a name field. In many cases, it's called campaign name. And if we take a look at someone going through and doing ETL and pulling all those different name fields together, even the creative name, right? There's logic that goes into creating these names, and many different groups have taken some time to build out a taxonomy that goes into that naming convention, as you can see here. When you pull all that together, it's hard to understand what do those different components mean, what's the order that they're in some cases may not have all of the same information across those different teams and point solutions. And so if we break that apart and take a look really at that logic or that data model that went into creating that naming convention, you can see here that there is bits and pieces of information fragments that are filled in by different teams, some better than others, some in specific orders. In some cases, there's fields that don't necessarily make sense from a content or creative perspective. Now, after putting Claravine in place, we help standardize and enforce that data governance and the taxonomy across all those different point solutions and teams to ensure that that common standard makes its way through all the different systems that are delivering experiences and providing the analytics and the business decisions that go into any sort of output for future marketing campaigns or optimizations. And so now we take a look, after that standard's been put in place, all of the naming conventions follow a common standard. They all have the same information that's been provided in the same structured way, and all of the data you can see follows the same criteria. So you have a product catalog, everything's been tagged the same from a product standpoint. You have a campaign or business objective that really doesn't have a place to be stored in any specific point solution, but it's a piece of information that you want to be able to roll up your analytics and understand what's happening around all of the tactics that went into the product launch in 2020 Q1. By having this all structured, you can see that everything comes out consistent. So no matter who receives the data, what dashboard, or what other solution, everyone can depend that the naming conventions and the data are going to be standardized as it flows through to the different systems. And so now I want to spend a few minutes talking about the steps that go into governing that common model. So the first step, being able to align the teams on a common enterprise taxonomy. In many cases, this can be the most challenging and most time-consuming step in the process. It starts with usually gathering spreadsheets across those different teams, understanding what point solutions, what external teams such as agencies and other groups are creating campaigns, creating metadata, and then being able to align on what that common taxonomy should be. The second step after that alignment is to implement that automated and governed process. So being able to put a process in place and a tool in place that lets each of those teams still operate and do things independently, but be able to follow that standard governed process so they can get that standardization as the data flows through. And then being able to manage and connect that data centrally. So while that alignment on that common taxonomy is great to start, we all know that that's going to change over time. As new fields, that data model changes, you want to extend that data model, being able to do so in a centralized way and push that out to the different teams. And then also data that's typically lived in spreadsheets, whether that be through agencies or other teams, being able to have that data in a platform such that it can be passed through in the same manner to the data science teams or to other data dashboards, where in the past it may have lived on someone's laptop in a spreadsheet. Now let's take a minute to talk about the key elements as it relates to marketing campaign data. So being able to centrally align that taxonomy, naming conventions, and have a standard for all of your marketing teams. Also having a process when there is collaboration for generating, tracking tags, click-through URLs, and then being able to automatically validate the landing pages, the tags are working. So while you may have a standard, be able to implement standard naming conventions and tracking codes, you also have to make sure that all of the tags on those pages are functioning to pick up the data and pass that to the different systems and make sure that the consumer is going to receive the right experience. And then, as I mentioned, being able to centrally manage those data formats and flows across the ecosystem. So your email team has a very different set of needs than your paid media team or someone running Facebook ads. And so you have to have a data model that can conform and fit their needs while also being able to centrally manage that and pass it into other analytics, BI, and connect it into different teams so everyone has access to the same set of metadata. In a very similar fashion as we think about content, also being able to standardize that content across campaigns and ultimately the content that is part of those experiences that are being driven to by your marketing team. Have a governed process across different digital asset management systems for content tagging, your content management system, so everyone's using the same set of metadata to tag all of the pieces of content or marketing campaigns that are in play. And then allowing teams to be able to collaboratively manage and modify that data. So being able to control what data they can edit, what data is locked down, and again, as tags evolve and new things get added, being able to update that on the fly. If we take a look at one process example here, one of the most complicated ones that I feel like everyone can relate to is around media data governance. So for paid media campaigns, a lot of companies are still, and agencies are still working in spreadsheets. both from an efficiency standpoint, and it's just how things have been done. And so you have the media planning team that goes into understanding what the media buy is going to look like, your creative agency and team building those assets, then going over to have the ad tags created with any sort of click-through redirects, any other brand safety, and then the campaign actually being trafficked. Before that campaign actually goes live, there's some manual QA, QC steps that go in to check that the landing page is up, the tags are working, any ads are showing properly. Then the campaign's set live. There's another set of those quick checks. But if anything happens along the way where those aren't working or aren't checked to 100%, the results and the data can flow inconsistently with different naming conventions because there are no standards during that setup process. Now, where we can help automate, and using a tool like Claravine to help automate that media data governance, really can put into play, the steps that were, very manual and there was no way to enforce the standard, but the media planning still needs to happen, working with the client, the creative agency is still building all the assets, the ad tags still are being built out, but then the metadata and the providing that has a common model, common framework for all the data to be required and consistency across those different channels. Then the landing page validation and tag validation that can be automated as well, such that it can reduce the time to launch a campaign by not having to manually go out and check all those tags and pages. And then after the campaign goes live, not only do you want to check immediately that the campaign's set up properly, but over the course of the campaign while it's active, whether that's an always-on campaign or a campaign that's running for a finite period of time, having that assurance that everything's working from the data being sent to the landing pages and the tags, such that when the data flows through to the different systems, whether they're DMPs or analytic solutions, that the data is going to be 100% accurate. What does this mean? It means there's a massive productivity gain from the time the campaign starts to getting it out the door, knowing that the data is going to be set up properly and everything's going to function as expected. And I always like to show this kind of a real example, kind of from an analytics report of what are the tracking codes and kind of the data looks like when you have a bunch of teams kind of doing what they think is the best practice or what they believe is their standard for providing a standardized naming convention. In this case, you may have consistency to some degree, but then there's situations where a tag is trafficked incorrectly, there's a copy and paste error, and you see various pieces of information that can show up in the tracking code. After there's a standard put in place, not only are the tracking codes consistent, but you also have data rolled up on common terms in the human readable form, not just having to parse through abbreviations and other aspects. And so the availability to look at the analytics and provide consistency across your web analytics solution and other solutions, everyone's operating on the same data model. So three major benefits at Claravine that we provide. Really, from an analytics perspective, it's improved reporting accuracy, unified cross-channel insight, so being able to track across different channels what's happening across your marketing organization, being able to create richer audience profiles with this metadata, which ultimately results in improved content performance for those audiences, and then ultimately more personalized experiences and increased digital engagement. Now I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about a case study from one of our customers. So that customer is Holland America, who many of you are probably familiar with. They have over 500 cruises across many different ports, across 98 different countries. And they have over 10,000 campaigns, digital campaigns running across different media channels. And increasingly having a focus on those digital experiences and acquiring new customers through those channels. And so before using Claravine and becoming a customer, they had 63% of their campaigns were not tracked properly, or in some cases maybe not tracked at all, but they weren't using the same language to describe how customers were engaging to be able to properly analyze the most effective media and ad spend. After putting Claravine in place, almost 100% of their paid media campaigns were tracked, which ultimately led to them making better business decisions by being able to understand the allocation of their media through that standardization and standard naming conventions. And so what did that mean for them? A 10 to 15% increase on return on ad spend for each new dollar tracked. Over 90% of their campaigns matched the data format, had tracking codes in the proper format, and had standard naming conventions, which for their analytics team was a 95% reduction in time spent on data quality processing. So reducing the time to actually have to go through and understand the data, do ETL before they could do their analysis. And that's all. I want to thank you for joining my session, and please reach out if there's any questions. Here's where I can be found on Twitter, and obviously engage if there's any questions today through the Slack channel. Thanks.
Thanks so much for watching this presentation. Join us on the Analytics Nexus Slack to talk with our presenters about this topic and more.